Brent Venables has to win or he will be fired after this year, or at least he should. But good news for Sooners fans is on the way.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. It's G5 Friday, which means Washington State's record prediction is up next on today's show. You'll hear about the Wisconsin Badgers, who have one of the toughest schedules in college football. So does the team of my guest today, Jay Smith of Locked On Sooners. You can catch him on Twitter at Unfair Sports. We're getting to a ton on the program today, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, Jay, a lot gets made about Oklahoma's schedule in the pundit discussion landscape because, oh boy, it's really hard. Oklahoma is the most fraudulent 6.5 win total team in the country because they are actually an 8.5 win caliber team, I think, masquerading as a 6.5 win total team on account of the fact that it's a gauntlet. I'm taking them over. I do like the Sooners. I like the defensive progression. I like the players on that side of the ball. I think John Mateer and Jaden Ott with Deion Burks is a really good three-headed monster to drive your offense forward. I think Ben Arbuckle's good. I hope he's able to scheme a run game better than he did at Washington State. I think his quarterback will help with that. So I'm taking the Sooners over 6.5. I landed on 7-5, Jay, to be the Florida of last year, basically. Best 7-5 team in the country. I think 8-4 happens before 6-6. But what do you make of that expectation range for Oklahoma in a year where I think you agree Brent Venables has to win at least as many games as I'm discussing, or he shall be shown the door?
Yeah, he's going to need to win at least probably 8, in my personal opinion, to be safe. But at the same time, I've said this to Sooner fans and Sooner Nation, and I love your intro, that, Brent Venables got to win or he's going to be fired. He's going to get his 5th year. And let me explain to you why. If there was one thing that would have told us that Brent Venables was successful at Oklahoma, what do you think that one thing would be?
The defense.
There you go. He had a top 10 defense last year with an abysmal offense, an offense that was non-existent. If Brent Venables' defense was not that good last year, he probably would have been shown the door already. But he gave you exactly what he said he was going to give you. Now, the only issue you run into that is he's had to cycle through some offensive coordinators. Jeff Lebby was 2 years, then he got the head coaching job at Mississippi State. Can't fault him for that. Mainly because offensive-minded coaches typically get poached before the defensive-minded guys do. So this is going to be an expectation for Oklahoma for the next 4 to 5 years if Brent Venables is there. He's going to lose his OC every 2 to 3 years. Just get that in your minds and be prepared for that to happen. A head coaching job will open. They will poach that guy. So for me, Brent Venables he's not on the hot seat like everybody thinks, because as long as his defense is really good and the offense is just average, this team should win at least 8 games. Now, granted, you're right. The gauntlet's there mainly because 7 teams on the coaches poll that just dropped, Oklahoma has to play. So they've got a tougher schedule than most people would think. It's really tough. While at the same time, we've got to still see those teams produce. Remember, majority of those teams are breaking in a new quarterback. The only ones that aren't is South Carolina and LSU. Tennessee just lost theirs. Things are a little weird there right now because I haven't seen the greatest reports out of Tennessee with Joey Aguilar so far. Even though I like him for the system, think it's going to take them probably a season to figure it out. But I digress. Oklahoma does have a very good chance of shocking everybody. As you said, they're probably the most fraudulent 6.5 over/under win total in college football right now.
But in a good way, In
a great way.
If I were employing a tactic that I've been very hurtfully accused of many a times, clickbait is the term, I would have led my show with Oklahoma is fraudulent. I wouldn't have been necessarily misleading you, but
No.
the phrase Oklahoma's a fraudulent 6.5 team, it doesn't have to be a negative. In this instance, I think it's a positive. So here's how I have there, but I just want to point out, I didn't do that because I care about you all so very, very much. I do. I love this sport, truly. I think Oklahoma is going to start 5-0. They have 4 games at home. 2 of them are against non-Power 4 schools, or 3 of them actually, and the 2 Power 4 schools you play are teams I frankly don't like as much as Oklahoma. I like Michigan more than I like Auburn, but I don't think either one goes into Norman and wins. I think Brent Venables' defense will be the difference in the Michigan game because Bryce Underwood, I know Michigan doesn't have to throw the ball a lot, but you're not throwing 0 passes in Norman, Oklahoma. He's going to be starting his 2nd career game in all likelihood. I don't think he's walking into Boomer Sooner country and walking out as a winner, Sharon Moore revenge game-ish or not. So where I think the first loss comes into play, cover your ears, Sooner fans. I like Texas more than Oklahoma. Sorry, I'm doing it. Taking Texas there. South Carolina, I think that's a loss because it's on the road. I like the Gamecocks a lot. I have them power rated ahead of Oklahoma going into the year, taking them to win at home. Ole Miss is a win. I think Tennessee and Bama are losses. Missouri's a win. LSU is a loss. Between LSU and Tennessee, I can readily see Oklahoma winning 1. I like those other teams in those spots just a hair. If Tennessee's at home for Oklahoma, I think that's a win. I would rather, for the Sooners' sake, you swap the home and road with LSU and Tennessee, and I think you'd guarantee 1-1. I can see them splitting those games, which is why, as I said earlier, I think they go 8-4 before they go 6-6, but I did land on 7-5. I don't think things will be perfect all the time with John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle. I do think that they are good, that they are capable. I don't think they're going to the SEC championship game, but is there any major disagreement you have in there in my schedule breakdown for the Sooners?
Yeah, I think you're discounting Oklahoma's ability to win on the road. That Tennessee game to me is wide open. And I think that there's a game that Oklahoma can win. I think that's the road one. They'll probably win. And I'm going to also say the same thing about the South Carolina game. I know, don't shoot the messenger here, but that wide receiver room does not look very good. Neither does the running back room for South
I'm a
Carolina.
Beamer ball kind of guy.
Right now.
If I had to rank my top 3 SEC coaches on Saturday game days, I don't think Beamer is going to be left off of that top 3. I'm just saying. I Beamer.
I can understand why you would do that, after last season. And we're all very high on Lenore Sellers. I'm high on Lenore Sellers. I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the conference, but I don't think the weapons around him is going to be up to snuff for this season. Next year, I think he's going to terrorize all of the SEC because I think at that point they'll realize, oh, we need another Rocket Sanders. We probably need to go find us a Rocket Sanders. And they don't have that right now. And it's nothing against them. I just don't see it yet. I have to be, it's one of those, prove it to me.
Just watch for Nick Harbor on the perimeter. Nick Harbor.
Yes.
His position is football player.
Yes, he is. His position is football player. Has he produced the football player is stuff that we've been waiting for out of a Nick Harbor? I know Nick Harbor. I have watched him. I remember watching him and Dylan Edwards run a 40-yard dash at one of the camps, and Dylan Edwards got him by like a millisecond. And this dude's about like 60 pounds bigger than Dylan Edwards. Yeah. And I'm like, that is absurd for a human being to move that fast. That is a bear chasing you down the street. You will not outrun him, period. You better hope the person that's running next to you falls so they get eaten instead of you. That is what I see out of Nick Harbor. But I ain't seen him really catch nothing like that yet, and I haven't seen him and Sellers really connect in that capacity. Granted, that can happen down the road, but I think that South Carolina is going to really want to run the ball and be a strong run team, and I think that's the one thing that Oklahoma's best at. I think they were forcing teams under their average by like 60-something yards, 60 or 70 yards last season on the run. Teams were not running very well against the Oklahoma defense, and honestly, I think this run defense this year is better than it was last year.
How about that? Jay Smith thinks Oklahoma's defense will be better than last year. Well,
better.
That'd be pretty good. That'd be pretty good. Kind of like the Oklahoma Sooners. Pretty darn good. Pretty not playoff, not SEC championship, but pretty darn good.
Maybe.
Pretty good. Well, If they, no 8-4, I won't allow it, Jay. I will
But what
knock
about
down.
10-2?
Okay, well, yeah, 10-2, you're getting in.
I'm just saying.
Of course, 10-2 is getting into the play. I thought you were going Tony Petitti on me here, who when he took the stage at Big Ten Media Days and said 8-4 gets you to the playoff in other sports, I said, I threw up in my mouth. It was so very, very wrong. But everything with Jay Smith is always so very, very right. Locked On Sooners on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Great as always, my man, from the SEC to. Do you think I planned these shows by accident, coincidentally? Absolutely, positively not. Where did Oklahoma's quarterback and offensive coordinator come from last year?
Washington State.
Washington State. The Cougs record coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel's the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. College football is really close. It's happening this month, just a couple of weeks away. If you want to bet on any games that you see this year or that you will see in the long-term future, like Ohio State, Michigan, for instance, you can go over to FanDuel and see everything you want. They've got all the college football action you could possibly need. Games, win totals, conference title odds, national title odds, it's all over there, so make sure you go and check them out. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'm trying to figure out what to feel about Washington State this year because everything is going to be different. So I bring on somebody who knows a lot more about the team than myself. Alex Brink, former Washington State quarterback and radio color analyst for the Cougars broadcasts this season. Over 30 transfers making their way to Pullman, Alex, with first-year head coach Jimmy Rogers for a team that has had its ups and downs quite a lot. They've been one of the streakiest teams in college football over the last several years, as you've seen. I mean, the same team that can go out and beat Washington and Texas Tech can also do whatever the second half of last season turned out to be. So coming into this year, their preseason win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 5.5. And quite frankly, I don't know if that's right. They have one of the weirdest schedules in the country. And I don't know if 5.5, it could be the best number or it could be the worst number. And I just don't quite know. What have your impressions been so far as we inch closer to kickoff?
Well, I mean, I tell you what, man, like I am the supposed expert. There's no doubt about it. But I am equally as anxious to get to this season as you are to see what this team is all about. I do think that Jimmy Rogers and the new staff bring a lot of energy. I'm excited about that. I just don't know about the personnel, right? You have some holdovers from last year and kind of the previous regime. You have all those transfers you talked about, most of them, a lot of them, tied to South Dakota State, a championship level football team, and Jimmy Rogers. But man, there's a lot of unknowns, and the schedule is one of them for sure. I like this team to win more than 5.5 games if that's where the number's pegged at. Some of that has to do with that schedule, but there's a lot of travel. There is a lot of new faces, new teams, new organizations to face. But I like what I've seen from Jimmy Rogers so far.
What he's trying to do reminds me very much of Curt Cignetti last year at Indiana. And he's not the first coach to do this, where he goes to a new spot and he says, let's bring everybody that I can from my previous stop, even if that's a place that was playing at a lower level of football. Because South Dakota State, obviously, an FCS program that has been phenomenal over the last 5 years or so with multiple national championships. And they were a very good team a season ago. I believe went to the semifinals, right, of the FCS playoffs. And
right.
I look at that and go, well, last year, the James Madison guys went with Curt Cignetti. He brought the quarterback from Ohio, and they went 11-1 in the Big Ten. It wasn't the most brutal Big Ten schedule. It was still a Big Ten schedule. They went 11-1. They beat Michigan, for goodness sake. There is a difference, though, that I can see here, and that's that South Dakota State last year went to Oklahoma State on the road, lost the game. I think it was 47-20 more or less. And I mean, it wasn't the least competitive FCS Power 4 game I've ever seen. Oklahoma State was not very good, though. So that's part of my hesitation, along with quarterback questions about Washington State. Do you think those are fair questions to ask about how it's going to translate when you're going from playing, Montana State, and everybody else that's in, or they're not in their conference specifically, but when you go from that to all of a sudden you're playing at Ole Miss, you're playing Washington at home, who I think is improved amongst, Oregon State twice as well. Like it's a different level. So do you think that's a fair question to wonder?
I think it's a very fair question. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's realities of, FBS level football to FCS level football for sure. And I think, the one thing I will say is that the athletes that have come with this staff were kind of the cream of then the quarterback who ended up at Iowa. And there are certainly some rave reviews about him so far. Now, they brought a lot of defensive players. I think that really helps. I mean, those defensive players can come in right away on the back end in a system they know and step up. I think in general, if you marry some top-level FCS talent with FBS-level athletes, right, that could step in and they kind of gel together, you get what Indiana got, right? You get what Kurt Cinetti got. And I wonder if, Jimmy Rogers and his staff can do the same thing. But you have some questions at the quarterback position. You have Zebbie Eckhouse coming back. He had a really nice bowl game, but he was the backup all year, has a ton of experience playing at the FCS level at Bryant before Washington State. But again, you lost a lot of playmakers that went with Jake Dickert to Wake Forest. You lost Kyle Williams to the NFL draft and the New England Patriots. And so there's a lot of holes personnel-wise that you just don't know. And especially this early in fall camp, we're looking to find out who is going to emerge.
So the schedule for Washington State, I've long described, Alex, as one of the weirdest, maybe the weirdest in all of college football. So last year it'll be like this before, the Pac-12 has an actual conference slate to play. But for those who don't have it memorized, most of you, I presume, Idaho, San Diego State, at North Texas, Washington, at Colorado State, at Ole Miss, at Virginia. Like, that stretch of road games is wild. Toledo, at Oregon State, Louisiana Tech, at James Madison, and then Oregon State again. This has to have the greatest number of conference opponents that are in different conferences than any schedule in the history of college football. You've got the MAC, you've got the Sun Belt, the SEC, the Pac-12, the ACC, the Big Ten, the Mountain West, and the Big Sky on the same schedule. So it's strange. It's odd. I think they can wind up around the 500 range, but there are some games on here that some people might look at and go, I don't think that'll be much of a problem. North Texas is not going to be an easy game to go to Denton, and that's a program that, like Washington State, brought in a lot of transfers this offseason. Colorado State's a game I think they could easily lose because the Rams have been a solid program over the last couple of years. Let's put the high-profile ones aside. Like Virginia, not a great ACC team, but still an ACC team. Let's put that one and Ole Miss aside for a moment. When you look at those Mountain West games, where do you feel like Washington State matches up compared to those schools?
Well, it's interesting in general. I think it's a minor miracle the schedule came together at all, right? Like you look at all. I mean, with the Pac-12 falling apart, then the Mountain West scheduling alliance falling apart. The fact that Washington State was able to even piece this together, and I guess that speaks to the two games against Oregon State where you definitely had to piece it together because you needed to find another game. So you just went with the Bees. But I think there's you like you said, you have those higher profile games, but you have some games in there that in past years you would say, hey, that feels like a really winnable game at Colorado State. Going to James Madison, like, gosh, I mean, that's a tough trip also when you talk about going back to the East Coast again, right? And so, you've got a number of games in there that I wouldn't call them toss-ups, but are certainly games, that you don't have a great feel for. North Texas is one that, I think you really alluded to. I think my thought process as I look at those matchups is if this staff, if Jimmy Rogers, Coach Bobbitt, the defensive coordinator, can come in and they can take the pieces that they brought from South Dakota State and match them with returners at the linebacker position, some returners at defensive end. You got a great corner in Jamori Colson. If they can piece together a defense like has that system that they had with Jackrabbits, they're going to be a really tough out anywhere they go. Maybe other than Ole Miss, because that's an obvious, there's some obvious issues with that around team speed and some of the things you get with that Rebel program. But in general, I do think that this defensive system can win at a high level and cause problems for teams like Colorado State. They're going to run the air raid and be, relatively consistent in what they do. I think they can go on the road and win again against another air raid team in North Texas, and a team that, Eric Morris, they've seen a lot of similar looks before this. I think a lot of this roster has. So my thing is on offense. We're transitioning, right? As Cougar fans, we're transitioning from this air raid family and Mike Leach and Eric Morris and all these guys and Ben Arbuckle, and we're transitioning to what is now with Danny Freund. We're not quite sure. It was a lot of two-back. It was a lot of multi-tight end when they were at South Dakota State. But if you talk to Coach Freund, which I have, he would say, hey, look at my North Dakota film. When I was coaching in North Dakota and I was calling plays there, a lot of one-back, a lot of spread. We're going to run the football. We're going to have balance, but I am still going to utilize our athletes on the field. And so there's some question marks for me about that offensive system. We're going to find out week 1 against Idaho. What's that going to look like? Then you have the San Diego State game. I think that'll be a really intriguing matchup because you get San Diego State at home. That's a program that's improving. I think it's a good bellwether early in the season for where Washington State is at. And then obviously you have the Huskies coming into Pullman for the Apple Cup. And that'll really be one where you just say, all right, is this team for real? Or do they have a lot to work on? Is there too much change in 1 year? Because the Huskies, like you said, are improved. They still have their own question marks, and the Apple Cup in Pullman is a toss-up no matter what.
I'll give them benefit of the doubt, log my official prediction at 6-6 in a bowl game. But this is such a mystery team to me. Again, the conference affiliation of their opponents go like this, and I'm just doing this off memory, but I'm, as you may be able to tell everybody out there listening or watching, a college football sicko. Big Sky, Mountain West, American, Big Ten, Mountain West, SEC, ACC, MAC, Pac-12, Conference USA, Sun Belt, Pac-12. That is, you know what? That is the greatest schedule in the history of college football, just because you have hit so many different conferences. Dare I say, we'll never see anything like it again. But year 1 of the Jimmy Rogers era is very close. Alex Brink on the Washington State radio broadcast. He's the analyst. He will have all 12 games to watch in person. Alex, my man, great having you on.
Thanks for having me, brother. Appreciate it.
We're going to a team that recently, within the last few years, went to Pullman next, and they were not victorious. I don't plan these things accidentally. Wisconsin, what do we do with Wisconsin? The toughest schedule in the Big Ten, maybe the toughest schedule in all of college football, unfortunately, belongs to the Wisconsin Badgers. Ryan Herrings of Locked On Badgers is here. I went through the schedule, Ryan, picking each game. The win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 5.5. I legitimately did want, because I think Billy Edwards is an upgrade at quarterback. I don't think Luke Fickell's incompetent at head coach. They've got a new offensive coordinator. I wanted to get them to a bowl game. I just couldn't quite do it. I can see it, but I need to be talked into it, and I need to know which game I need to swap here, because it's going to be a solid start outside of Alabama. I think Wisconsin is going to start 3-1 and 4-2. They play Miami of Ohio, Middle Tennessee State, at Alabama, Maryland, at Michigan, Iowa. I think they go unbeaten in the home games. I think they lose both of the road games. Then the back half it's just rude. It's just rude. The easiest game on the back half is probably Washington at home or at Minnesota. I don't know what the Badgers did to upset Tony Petitti's scheduling group, but clearly they did something. So I land on 5-7. That's an under 5.5. I think is a really good number for this Wisconsin team and the schedule they've got. But I land under. Talk me into 6-6.
I mean, listen, you hit on a lot of the reasons nationally people are looking at this and saying, I don't know. It feels like a 5-win team. It feels like this isn't going to get better. I would counter with this. And before the show, we talked a little bit. I said, I'm going to talk you into it. Not really my job. I don't necessarily want to talk you into it, but I do think there's some points to consider. Do you know Wisconsin's record last year? 5-7, right? So they were 5-7 last year. They played Bama last year, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota. They went 5-7 basically against this schedule last year. They did that with Braden Locke. They did it in a situation where they almost beat Penn State. They hung with Oregon. I mean, you and I talked about that game.
Yeah.
They did it with one of the worst quarterbacks in the Big Ten, a non-functional passing game. They did it with a front seven that was bereft of talent. They finished 134th in the country in tackles for loss. They went out in this offseason and brought in 6 guys on the defensive line and Billy Edwards. If they're just a little better at either of those spots, they win 6 or 7 games last year against this very same schedule. The other thing I would talk about, big thing that Luke Fickell has done his first 2.5 years in this program, he's recruited really well. Among the best recruiting classes that Wisconsin has really ever gotten. If you look at the recruiting rankings, the composite rankings, those players are now sophomores. Those players are now coming into the program. We just did a squad show. We talked about Dylan Jones. He's going to be a really good running back for this program. There's a couple receivers they got that they really like. The offensive line that they've recruited well is maturing. They have a couple linebackers they really like. Now, some of that's potential, absolutely. But that's what happens when you recruit well. It's that young potential starts to mature in a program that Luke Fickell has proven he can develop and mature that talent, because this is what he did at Cincinnati. They brought in highly talented athletes. They developed them. And by year 2 or 3 in that conference, that program was a lot better. So I get it. It's a brutal schedule. Wisconsin is not going to win 8-9 games, but they won 5 last year with worst play at quarterback and worst play in the trenches. So I feel like you look at that, Badger fans have optimism that Billy Edwards is worth a win over Braden Locke. And I think that's quite fair, actually.
Okay. That's a compelling argument. Here's where I struggle, and I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I don't want to sell the program that I'm going to mention here short, or the team, quite frankly, because they like what they've got at quarterback. And as we also talked about on the Locked On Big Ten squad yesterday, they've got one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. The road environment's tough to play. Almost beat Penn State last year. So the road games that Wisconsin has to go through, it is a gauntlet of all gauntlets in college football. It's so tough. At Bama, at Michigan, at Oregon, at Indiana, and at Minnesota is the one that I was referring to. The weakest teams, I think, of that group are Minnesota and Michigan, but that doesn't mean I think those are weak teams. I know that those fan bases are going to show up to that stadium. Maybe if Minnesota struggles at the end of the year, there isn't quite that extra level of juice, but those are physical teams, and those trench guys you mentioned are going to be really tested in those 2 games. Those are the spots. Maybe if I'm overvaluing Illinois going into this season, they're my preseason number 4 team in my Big Ten power rankings. Maybe at home you can snag them, but one of those 3 games, you're going to have to find a way to win. Which one to you, at Michigan, Illinois at home, or at Minnesota, rings to you as the most likely to result in a Wisconsin win?
I think Michigan's tough. I know there's a lot of Badger fans, and we talked about it, that new quarterback. We don't really know who Sharon Moore is. It's still Michigan. You're going to the big house. I think that's a tough one. If you give me those 3, I think it's probably Minnesota, who did lose a decent amount. They do have a new quarterback, and we're not really sure what that's going to look like. He's going to have to jump up a level of play. Darius Taylor's great, but they lost
new defensive coordinator as well. Their defensive coordinator got poached by Miami.
New defensive coordinator, and they lost a couple cogs on that offensive line from that running game last year. I think that's one. I mean, here's what I would say too. I think, and this is somewhat reflective of the era we live in, the generation we live in. Sometimes we rely a little too much on what just happened and ignore the last 20, 25 years. Wisconsin has a bit of a track record across several coaches. It's not just Fickell, across Gary Anderson, Bielema, Chris, going all the way back. I don't know if I'd be so quick to just assume a game like Minnesota, Indiana, Illinois are going to be games that Wisconsin can't win. Or I know you're not saying they can't win, but Wisconsin, I don't know about Indiana. I'm not sure that's a loss for Wisconsin, truthfully. Indiana is going to not be tested as much as the Badgers are. There is value in being tested. And I don't know about an Illinois program either that, quite frankly, is certainly Bielema has done a great job there. And Altmaier is one of the most veteran quarterbacks in this conference. But that's not a team Wisconsin can't beat either. I think what's happened a little bit, and I'm rambling a little bit, but I think what's happened a little bit nationally, and I get it. I get it from this perspective. Last year's Wisconsin team left a really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But over the last 20 to 25 years, that could very easily just be a little dip in a program that has been among the most consistent in college football. And let's be careful about overvaluing one data point in a 20 to 25-year stretch, because a lot of those things that made Wisconsin successful, some of those in-state players, the strength and development, the reliance on the running game, which new offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes is coming in and delivering, a lot of those things that made Wisconsin so successful and so hard for those Illinois-type teams to beat, I think are going to be back this year to some degree. And I wonder if we're overvaluing one good year of Indiana, Illinois, a little stretch of Minnesota, and overvaluing one bad year of Wisconsin.
I think that's a pretty reasonable argument. I
got you up to 6 yet. You were at 5.
I want to. And by the way, this is not me saying Michigan or Wisconsin rather is not going to beat any good teams. I think Iowa is also facing a brutally tough schedule, respectable program. I don't think that's going to be an easy game to win, but I think they will. I think Washington's a team that takes a step forward this year. I think Wisconsin wins that game. You're certainly not going to be able to argue that they won't be tested by the end of the season. But at Indiana, maybe look at that home game against Illinois. Maybe that's a spot where the Illini stumble. And I don't think that the talent gap between Illinois and Wisconsin is as big as what it might be when Wisconsin takes the field on the road in Tuscaloosa, or when they play Ohio State, or when they play Oregon. But Oregon, if Oregon were at home, I would have that one as like a potential kind of upset pick, not just because of what happened last year, but because Oregon's just replacing a lot from last season. Maybe Ohio State gets interesting. Maybe they hang with Oregon on the road. Maybe there's just a lot of, I just don't know which one. Like Minnesota would probably be the one. Gosh, the quarterback point is a really good one. You might have won me over, but I just, like PJ Fleck's track record is also not one I want to disregard and just say, "Oh, this guy can't coach." Well, they don't do that. Like, no, they won 8 games last year, and people looking around going, "It was fine." Wisconsin would love to win 8 games right now.
Oh, and that's a very good point. Like I almost look at it less in terms of this individual game they need to win, and more clump that group together. Illinois, Indiana, Washington, Maryland, Iowa. I just think they're gonna win their share of them. I mean, because they're gonna have the 2 early wins. I think they get Maryland. I think they get Iowa as well. Out of that rest of that group, they're not gonna be able to win 2 more. And that's not even to say like you can trip up a good team too. Like, I just don't think Wisconsin's going to lose every tough game on the schedule, right? And I know you're not saying that because you have them, or with the win against Iowa, but God, they were so close last year to 6. And I'm telling you, Braden Locke was a disaster. And
okay. Live here as we record the show. I'm sorry, PJ Fleck. I know you're rowing the boat out there. Wisconsin to 6-6. I think they'll be like Florida from last year. Brutal schedule, overperform expectations, save Luke Fickell's job. Okay. I'm on board. That's how good my man Ryan Herrings of Locked On Badgers is. That is it for today. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.